Good morning, children, and today I am going to read part one of Antinomia, the Underground City. And I'd just like to say for posterity that this is not mouth herpes, it is a blackberry thorn that I got from a landscaping job that is only recently popped. It's kind of nasty. Antinomia, the Underground City, part one. Once, where heroes crumble, in a swamp of dark decay, through a maze of cluttered cubicles, a glistening array of glowing screens and shattered dreams cut off from earth and clay, a man sits down, head in his hands, his heart in bleak arrest. Forgone the trappings of his power, swept clean is his desk, a tight constriction clouds the pounding in his mighty chest. Two men are standing by in blue, a boot toe kicks box, of things it stings him, and he rises, fire in his eyes, fists like double hammers cocked and ready to go off. They step back as if stung themselves. He snarls his disgust, then lowers fists and with a listless shrug picks up his stuff, walks out the gleaming corridor, and damns their halls to rust. His woman, triumph of his money, bleached of hair and brown of tummy, wants him no more, and his honey on the side left town. So he sold all he possessed and wandered northward and to west, until he found some rugged country suited to his taste, then burned his fucking sports car, his old life, and his disgrace. By the countless stars of heaven and the flicking flames of hell, by the sun and winds that beckon, I do make a wrathful vow that as long as time is reckoned, I will stand as I am now, alone and unafraid of the approaching dark demise, of the sun and wind that burns me, or the pack of scornful lies that all men have told each other. No more will I spark their guise. I will stand as here I have been, with my clothes thrown in the fire. In my heart I'll keep the nakedness which oath does now inspire. From this day of freedom onward, I will no more be a liar. With solemnity he turned then, took up his axe and rope, a knife, a belt, and blankets, no need had he for a coat, then walked away from burning blaze, a twisted, smoldering hulk. It was not in him at that time to settle down and build a home, but rather leg it outward to the hills and then beyond. He had the urge to work his legs, to clear his mind and roam. 3 weeks he spent in wandering ways, walking long in lunging strides, sleeping as a beast beneath the trees and hanging rocks, gathering for his bed each night fir boughs and fire-dried moss. Bugs and slugs and tadpoles he ate, crawdads from the stream. He followed high into the hills as if in walking dream. He killed a deer and skinned it there beside a bubbling stream. Remnants of old camps he found, retaining walls of dry-fit stone, built to level out the ground, or mark of fires black and round. In terraced tier they rose in rows of permutated ground. Quickly moved he on again, as if a hound when catching scent, 'neath hanging rocks and shrouded glens, until he heard a lightsome laughter, rising with the notes of water, and he crept from shade to cover, and beheld the forest daughter. She was sitting on a rock, above a pool of water, and a fall fell on her tresses, glowing gold and auburn, splashing on her shoulders, running down her back and bottom, and she pointed to her lady friends, who came and laughed beside her, when their nipples tightened with the cold and shook with laughing splendor. Some were young and some were old, but to the one he felt most tender, the golden-haired and glowing-eyed, the forest's only daughter. He crept a little closer then, and felt his foot betrayed. A mossy pebble slipped beneath him as he gave it weight. Down he fell a little, grabbing at the nearest tree bough, but a girl had seen the movement, and with motion far more fluid, dove beneath the water, and with knife and teeth did surface, and in moments of his falling found himself by spears surrounded. Several men with hairy faces that had never seen a razor rose and popped out of the bushes just as if they'd always been there, and chagrined was he that had been watched, who thought himself the watcher. "Who are you?" the question started. "Who are you to even be here? Did you follow us or stumble up? And how come you are naked? Are you vision questing, or is molesting women what you're after?" No words came to mouth or mind. He only heard the laughter of the wetly dripping woman who had dipped beneath the water, who had called him as a siren calls a sailor to disaster. A snapping finger brought him round just as a hand quick slapped his face. He saw stars twixt him and the ground. But raised his eyes and braced, just as a fist was falling, and he took it in its place. Then a voice did call out quickly, "What is this you've found? Do you fault a man for looking, even lurking here around, when our women are the talk of all the country and the towns?" Then he saw a grizzled face, a snow-white beard and even teeth, and gentle eyes of clearest blue, the kind you trust that see through you, and fair resembled someone that he strongly wished he knew. Pulled he was up to his feet, and walked out to a shady place, and on a rock he took his seat. with what remains he had of grace. Elders gathered round him dressed in buckskins and in fleece. A hairy man in camo pants and spear behind him paced. So silent the assembly he could hear the crickets breathe. Finally the man who had spoken for him before stepped into the middle of the forest-needled floor. "Suppose you tell us of yourself," he said with courtly bow. "I meant no harm," began the stammer. "Let me go and I'll be gone. I heard the sound of water and beheld the forest daughter, and my heart began to hammer louder than the beaten gong. I should have left then, right away, but listen to my heart, I pray. Just listen while I have my say. I swear I won't be long. There's women I've seen in my time that are not worth a hollow dime. They're fake and false, and know what else? I'm tired of this rhyme. I just saw the most beautiful woman in my life. I have no other motive than to observe, experience, and understand such beauty. I am naked because cloth is a barrier between myself and the natural world. I am on a quest to eliminate all the barriers in my mind and to fully experience the truth of life." Then there was a silence that soon became a roar. As the elders muttered back and forth, the old man took the floor. He raised his arms to shoulder height, and silence reigned once more. "How long have you been in the woods, my boy, and what are your plans from here?" "I had not thought of anything when I began this trip. I only thought to get away from what I was before, to seek and find once more my path, the reason I am here." "And from there?" the old man asked. The young man shook his head. "I feel as if I'm being pulled by invisible thread. I cannot say beyond today where next I will be led." The old man turned to all and said, "I think we'll keep him here. Then we can all observe him and know if he brings danger. But decide for yourselves, it's never folly to beware. But first we have another task, now with time to address. It's the actions of another who has long been in our midst. Stand young Borin, son of Anborn, formerly of Clan Vicness." All eyes turned as one toward the man behind the rock, who stepped forth round the prisoner, and into the ring did stalk. A trembling in his hands betrayed the falter of his walk. "While this man, an outsider, came upon us unaware, think I we have another care," the Whitebeard then began. "Swift and simple is the oath that we have all taken. Why have you ignored it then, young Borin, son of Anborn? You have laid an undue hand of violence upon a man who had no chance to say his piece, for peace or war was stripped from him ere he could speak by your own hand. On his intent you took your chance and gambled poorly in this case, to treat one so who's now a guest. Since the cause of your suspicion was his nearly nude condition, why don't you amendment make, and loan the use of your own shirt to supplement his tattered cloak? He was nude watching our women. I thought he must have intention of some harm, I know not what, but he was armed, so I was rough. Perhaps I acted hastily, perhaps I was too tough, but do I owe this man my garment for arriving in the buff? You owe this man for undue harm you laid upon his face and arm, with concerned provocation, or without initiation. Of violence is first prohibition. No rights here but his were broken. Furthermore, I've cause to wonder how you came so quick to be there, and if your intense reaction were not more than just protection of our ladies in the water, but was tied to guilty anger. We don't mind you watching either, but you must not act in anger, for we now have indication of a fault in your character, and a hypocrite's not welcome on the Rogue or any river. They cause danger with dishonesty. None trusts a double standard. So be warned, young son of Anborn, you are watched and should be watching. Causing harm should make you guilty, not observing pretty ladies, when with them you could be talking. Perhaps you had bad intentions, though I make no accusations. Cultures in Vicness are different. But if there is no more dissent, then I'd like to quit this talking, and to dinner now be walking." All the elders looked and nodded to each other round the circle, and young Borin, son of Anborn, of his shirt himself divested, with a scowl walked off molested by his thoughts and heart of turmoil. And the elders filed quietly out through the shrouding forest. The old man spoke to the young man, said, "My name is Abel Savage. I have lived here since the 60s. I was born here in this valley. I was raised beside this river in the noble Savage family. Do you know of our history? Would you like to hear the story? Then to dinner now come walking, first the food and then the talking." So the young man hurried quickly, matching stride for stride the thick legs of the massive Abel Savage who had grown up in this valley, and they started to tell him his name, but the older man just shushed him, saying, "There's no name to sound as sweet as one earned well from your own kind. A formal name we'll give you when you become of our tribe. In the meantime we'll just call you by whatever comes to mind." The young man merely shook his head, and then he saw the fire. Then another and another. There must have been 4 or 5, in a circle roughly scattered and with dancing flesh alive. All the women in the circle were by men in steps surrounded. There was laughing, there was drumming, and the pipes and whistles sounded. Long before that gay abandon, and to be with friends around him, when the old man took his elbow and to pots of food did guide him. The old man filled a trencher up, and asked if he would need a cup, then handed him a wineskin flask, saw it downed in just a draught, and turned away with eyes aghast, then bade him seat himself and sup. This the young man did with pleasure. As he ate he took the measure of the women all around, but forest daughter was not found. Though with beauty all did grace the circle of that firelit place, none were a treasure to replace the girl in flowing water gowned. When at length the fires died to embers flicking at the sky, old Abel by the fire sat down, as children gathered all around, to sit with cats or lambs or hounds, and bid the young man hither hie. Once, not really long ago, but before most of us were born, a man set out from his old town to wear the black anarchist crown. He walked into the wild earth to claim what all men had at first, and see his sovereign soul's rebirth. Civilization had gone wrong, or so it seemed to him at first. So he rode out for his own song and dreamed a dream forgotten long, where men could live their lives full worth. The simplest explanation he could see was just to do nothing. Not govern, just refuse to be anything that wasn't free. Correspondingly, he rode into the purple hills at dusk, and there conceived the anarch's oath, which guides and protects each of us. No law, said he, no outside force, but only those who took the oath shall have the power to enforce the justice that pertains to us. As he lived by woods and streams, other lives did merge with his. He found himself leading a clan of wayward band survivalists, and one of them, her name was Liz, took he as hers and she as his. They bore 5 children, me and Ness, feral and rebel and true were theirs, and we became the 5 regions, the 5 nations of Clan Sauvage. The patriarch of this savage flame, on Noble Savage, was his name. Each child of theirs took a mate, each did the name of Savage take. Even the men who married in were honored then to claim our clan. So we all in time became savages in truth and name. We've kept the anarch's oath, and bound by it we've never once been found. By the outside we've lived our lives away from prying civilized, and when we find one in our woods, we find if he is bad or good. Watch him very carefully, for every gesture, every mood will tell us of his honesty. Without that trait he's unworthy of time, protection, energy, and must be made to quickly leave, and ne'er betray our secrecy. It's this maxim that keeps us free from those who'd not let us so be, who'd tax us of our lives' full worth and rob us of our place on earth. No, this must never come to be, so we enforce our secrecy. The children nodded, trained from birth to understand the anarch's oath. Abel looked all round the fire, saw all agreed, and he was pleased. He nodded slowly, shook his head, then bade them all go off to bed. He took the young man by the hand and said, I'll call you Tawny Man. Your skin's been baked a golden brown, and hair's the color of a lion's crown. Tawny's a good name for you, until we know your best virtue. Come then now, it's off to bed. There's sentries out, so stay in camp, or you might find an arrow's head lodged in your chest or in your back. So he was led to a children's tent where youthful bodies squirmed about, and fascinated watched them for a time, until they all fell into bed a puppy bile, sprawled as if dead, and when their breathing stilled rose to the night. He heard the drummers beating and the wild ecstatic cries, and on some pretext of eating wandered closer to the light. As the drums continued rolling as a deep and growing thunder, he felt something in him growing like an overarching hunger, and he saw within the firelight that the women all were naked, and the men likewise attired, clad with only nature's velvet. They were not rocking altogether to the drummer's dancing beat, and the dancers leaped and yelled and slapped their thighs and stamped their feet. He felt his body burning with the yearning and the heat, when out of the dark, the firelit dark, 2 baleful eyes and dusty feet, and he recognized the eyes of he who'd earlier him beat. Their eyes locked for a moment. Brooding Borin looked away. They both stared at the dancers, then the savage disappeared, fading silent to the dark as if he'd never even been there. Tawny looked around for darkling shape or deep illusion, but the silence was unbroken, and at length he went to bed, though the pounding and the moaning made it difficult to sleep, and he dreamed of paradise, of naked girls and firelight. When he awoke at break of dawning day, with ash in his mouth and sleep in his eyes, and head still pounding like the drums of last night, all the children were awake and away, and the adults still round the dead fires lay, passed out, stretched out upon the clay. He disliked iambic pentameter, but before him was another matter. From between two women rose a figure, magnificent of form, of twisted thews, corded like iron, wrought fresh from the forge, held up gleaming and hot in the chill air. He stretched, and muscles tensed like pools of steel, then relaxed in pantherish movement, and facing Tawny stood Abel Savage, eyes glowing yellow in the dawn. He appraised the young man for a moment, sensing what had in the night happened, and knowing he knew, turned away from him, filled a bread bowl with last night's cold meat soup, while a long hand rose beside him and gently brushed his hip. He gave the trencher to her while she leaned against his legs, then filled himself another, sat down, and at Tawny smiled. Tawny did not know then how he should proceed. Should he ask about the festa and confirm Abel's belief? And if so, would he be breaking their great code of secrecy? The punishment for that could be both exact and extreme, so he sidestepped thoughtfully and said instead the following. Tell me of this anarch's oath. What does it do and mean? I'm surprised that you don't want to know about last night, the ebb and flow, the rock and roll, the firelit frenzy of a paradise that's an inferno. About a man one just can't tell. All right, the anarch's oath I'll spill. There are only two laws, the rest interpretation. To do what you've agreed upon, follow your obligation. The other and the supreme law, a man's life is his own, his property, his efforts, and his fruits all he should have, and none should touch another's until consent should be gave, not his money, not his credit, not his past, nor his present. Responsibility's the only law Creator ever gave. You are in the interim of being one of us. If you stand some day before two solid witnesses, then you'll begin probation as you prepare for the test. What kind of test is this? Some act of worthiness? It's a barrage of questions by someone trained to the task. Someone you might call a druid or highest learned class. You'll go to Antinomia to fail or to pass, and on the way familiarize yourself to all the many ways natural law reiterates and respect ramificates. You'll see we have a good thing here, our disunited states. Natural law reigns faster here, or so we think in this place. He took a flask of water and poured it in his mouth, and finished up the bread bowl as Tawny served himself, and handed meat to Abel's other wife. Then waking up, she rubbed her sleepy eyes and smiled, and Tawny looked away. The aftermath of last night was embarrassing to see, in conjunction with attraction for one who'd with another lane. I, Abel Savage, speaker for the southern nomads, do swear this oath before my two wives and you, Tawny man. My life is my own, to do with as I will. The same goes for all humans, self-owning's mutual. So now I will never initiate physical harm. I will not coerce or threaten, unless threatened, raise an arm. I will never interfere with someone else's sexual choice, never force them or coerce them beyond giving just advice, and I know at least one rapist lost his nuts in a bench vice. I will not take what I've not earned except in desperate need, and with intent to later pay usury for the deed. And even if I'm starving, I'll not from another take. If that other's also starving, then on equal ground we stand. Less subject to that one's relatives, I would myself then make. I will do all I have. This is like a scratchy part. I still need to work over it. I think this is maybe an earlier edition. Anyway, so that's why the metrics are kind of herky. Less subject to that one's relatives, I would myself then make. I will do all I have voluntarily agreed to do. I will not libel or slander. I will not betray an oath. I will never tell a lie or use coercion or use force unless something above has been done unto me first. And if injustice has been done to me or any other, if he's taken of this oath, then whether strange or brother, while his business is his own and voluntude respected, I will rush to aid him, should he be not too far from me, and I will stand strong in all cases, so that justice be defended. Furthermore, one shan't be found, judged by those not by this oath bound. I will rush to aid all others who'd be brothers in such case, that justice will be done, lest I next, too, injustice face. To this end, I shall stay strong of arm and fleet of feet, and smart, I conclude. Tawny sat a while, chewing thoughtfully his beard, while Abel moved along, leaving his second wife sleeping there. Then he saw a flash of gold and curling auburn hair, and when he looked she disappeared, as women often do, amidst a youthful crowd, a flowing throng of pygmy nudes, and then he was distracted by a far-off beating drum. A nearby drum returned the throb, and Abel jumped up fast. grinned rosily, and strode away, exclaiming, "Ha! At last!" while folks jumped up around him, and a horn trumpet did blast. Still recording, just checking. Tawny hurried after, followed Abel through the trees. As tent flaps were thrown open, joyful women smiled in glee, and a stream of screaming children squealed, "Daddy's home! Daddy!" Then he saw them through the trees, part of the earth itself, clad all in moss and earth tones, brindle furs almost a pelt, as they glided, spectral figures, smooth as smoke about to melt. And the children, like a river or a rising buckskin tide, flowed toward them running, leapt into their arms and cried, and the mothers followed quickly, left by joy, undignified. At the forefront, Abel Savage met the leading warrior, grabbed him hand to forearm with the other arm around him, and with ease and backward squeeze up high into the air did lift him, then spun him round back to the ground and shouted, "Rebel! Brother!" They drew back, then did clasp again, a warm and heartfelt hug. Then a woman drew the leader down into her arms instead, and old Abel waited joyful, then back to the fires led. Feasting then commenced again with corn and acorn bread, thimbleberry jam and grapes and beans and fresh green salad, gooseberries, choke cherries, camas bulbs, and crab. Never had he seen a feast to look or taste as good. Families were laughing to once more be with their blood, when a dark shape slipped beside him and introduced himself. "I am Black Rodrigo, on the outside called Gomez. You seem ill at ease here, like you've just of late arrived. I too came from the outside, but have since been naturalized." There are tests of strength and manhood in all the primal camps. Some use simple vision. Lakota use the sun dance. Some mutilate their private parts. Some drug themselves to trance. In all the savage nations, all respect the anarch's oath. It's required knowledge from the farmers to the ants. But each tribe has its own culture. Take old Abel's, for instance. To be a man respected, you must know to hunt and fish, as well as when not to let the land replenish, and to have some extra skill just for interdependence. Abel loves the Celtic ways, the Bran laws, the bardic lays, the knotwork and the swordwork, and Danu, to whom he prays. You see it in the art and in the music that he plays. But Rebel worships Kernanos, the wild god of the forest. He has no need of anyone. He's like a primal force. The whole of him is wild, touchable to no one else. I have seen him slip up from in front of man in daylight, and kill him before he was seen, or gave time to react. He is like a panther, yet more wild, that's a fact. I wouldn't want to ever fuck around with such as that. He's the toughest man in all the nations that are 5, notwithstanding he stepped down from ministering his tribe. Instead, he leads the Dark Brigade, the deadliest men alive. Seeing only puzzlement, Rodrigo carried on. It's like the CIA and Green Berets rolled into one, with elements of Injun thought, Ninpo, and Taoism. They're the baddest warriors between here and Kingdom Come. Wait 6 months and see me then. Hopefully, I'll be one. Tawny eyed him thoughtfully, then looked at Rebel Savage. He seemed short compared to Abel, yet was not to sneer at. His legs were long as Tawny's, and he was more barrel-chested. Blue-gray eyes, clear as the dawn, locked on Tawny's own. Suddenly he felt a thrill go up and down his spine, as if his soul were bared and judged as adequate for now. The moment passed, the contact lost, his eyes dropped in relief. "I know," said Black Rodrigo. We all had felt his glance. "The man has power I want to have, and to understand." "What would you do in the Dark Brigade, if you could make it in?" "I'm not sure I can discuss, or if you'd understand. Suffice to say, the Dark Brigade goes 'tween this world and that. They're the only ones who ever visit outside, ever. Nomads guard the borders and keep people on the trail, but any contact outside must be carried out by Rebel." "Everyone? In 5 nations? They all entrust to him? The goings and the doings, all dependent on his whim? Sounds like tyranny, monopolizing information." "Rebel's not a man subject to his or any's whim. He leads the Dark Brigade. To know his men is to know him. Discretion's constant doctrine. This alone we trust to him. To go unseen, to go unheard, to go unthought of with no word, to be unknown, to be unfelt, until your death to be unsmelt. He vanishes like rising air. To him alone we trust our care. And if a man should ever lack discretion, or in danger, any here, then rest assured he'd end it then and there. We don't trust his regiment, we trust his sense of honor. No man can change or kill him, it's been tried, and see him there, laughing with his brother, seeming loose and all carefree. But as men surround this clearing, see his eyes flit through the trees, he's conscious of each leaf that falls, each breeze that blows the trees. See his hands? They never far from any weapon stray. That's why I want to be a part of Rebel's dark brigade. There is a way to open, see, all that your mind has seen, and to recall, both large and small, all that your senses bring. Accessing all those passages is part of what he trains, and why I want to be a part of Rebel's dark brigade. To be a man among men, trained as only they can train, to conscious be of all I see, a man whole hale and clean. Tawny sat a moment before he slapped his arm. "Let's go get some food," he said, with garishness and charm. Rodrigo rose and followed with a smile, both sad and warm. So he lived with the savage tribe of Abel and his several wives. He always looked for the girl he'd seen, but she remained, a glimpse, a dream, flitting like a fairy through the corners of his mind. He learned hunting, fishing, snares, and other arts of savages, from paleo to present age. He joined the boys with fighting spears, wove baskets with the girls, until one day he was led to the cave. He walked long hours through hanging forests and o'er a wind-swept hill. He smelled the salt upon the wind and heard the barking seals. They came upon an outcrop o'er the booming, hissing sea, while high above the seagulls cried and streaked the glistening scree. They paused a moment, smelling, sensing, feeling, tasting free, then journeyed down into the depths of an equally wild country. The dark limbs rose as arms, an army of silent sentries, but were parted by a path that darted to a cleft in the mountains green. "It's a workshop and a depot," explained young Black Rodrigo. "You can work in here from now on if you like. It's a metal shop and smithy and an armory. The privy is that ventilated shaft off to your right. Should you be in any hunger, there's some veggies in the larder, though a girl should bring some lunch from time to time. Just obey safety procedures and listen to your teachers, and you'll make yourself more useful to the tribe." The savages, he quickly learnt, knew more than he'd thought to suspect. They had technology that daily was not evident. There were several police scanners and a bank of strange computers that looked thrown up by one inclined to invent. There were metal fab machines, soldering irons, and silk screens, several men eating lunch, waiting to get paid. Crystal radio receivers, ropes and pulleys, ratchet levers. There was fire on the crucible today. There were racks of flechette guns and other forms of nasty fun, all imported courtesy the Dark Brigade. He then began education he'd always wished he'd had. He learned to put together broken things and poorly made. How they hauled so much equipment through the wild hills and forests, he would go on knowing probably all his life. But he resolved to keep eyes open and see all that was before him, while he learned the many secrets of this place. He found he had a talent for the art known as mechanics. He could understand the purpose of a thing. From the nonce all was surrendered to his own delight and wonder. As he put it back together, he would sing. "Here's a piece, there's a piece. I have seen peace on earth. I've seen him on the workbench, I've seen him on the dirt. I've dropped him in the cracks that lie between the paving stones. But I make shit work without him, 'cause the workbench is my home. Yeah, I make things go to and fro, across the floor and back again. I make things run that were broken. I make things work like a jerk or a flirt. Always check and grease each zerk, lest from your shirk things cease to work," said the mighty Abel savage, walking softly up beside him. Tawny spun around and laughed, and on the shoulder cuffed him. "It helps to improvise a song. It helps with the Te Deum. It's not quite a job, you know, working in here all alone. 14 hours a day are more than any man need have. You don't have to stay all day. There's nothing here to prove. But I've tried to be one of you, to learn your ways in truth. But most I like to be in here, where I have value, worth. There's much to do outside, I know, but here I've found a niche." "Precisely," said the old savage. "Specialization is for insects, nitwits, and old mathematicians. Round your talents other ways, with diversification. I want you to go abroad, pursue this fair land's feast. Of knowledge and perspective, gain experience at least, and study in the city for to prepare for your test. It's not meet for man to leave a thing he starts undone. Finish what you're doing, there's no need to drop and run, but keep in mind a caravan leaves with the morning sun." Tawny Man stood thinking long after Abel had left, then slowly took his projects out and finished what was best, then wrote simple instructions for the next man for the rest. He left the cave as night was falling and the crimson sky was brimming purple with the falling light of clustered stars, and wandered to the river where it joined the pounding surf. Behind him, staring gloomily at the last glowering clouds, his sharp ears heard the patter of small feet on gravel ground, and with a lithe twist of his body, he ducked and spun around. She was standing by the sea, the forest's only daughter, clad this time in skins and with a few beads in her hair. Held him with her eyes that fixed him breathless, standing there. She raised one arm and clearly spoke, "Be well now, where you go. Be wise and strong within your heart, and trust that it will guide you. And mayhap some happy Sunday you'll come back to here and find me." She turned as the setting sun dipped back beneath the sea. A red flash with a golden shine was all of her he saw, and rocks rose to obscure her as the waves behind him grew, to lash the cold and sorry sand, while in his heart hope grew. Anyway, that was the first part of the of Antinomia, the underground city, and more is on the way whenever I finish it. Have a good day.